The first time Princess Aranel saw the human, she assumed he was simply another quiet diplomatic attachment, a background creature meant to carry crates or stand politely beside the greater species of the Concord. And she thought this as she strode past him toward the council hall, her silken cloak whispering like moonlight along the crystalline floors, her mind occupied with treaties and dangers and the delicate dance of interstellar politics. Yet something made her glance back for the briefest moment, catching his eyes, seeing a spark there, raw and unpolished, a core of something fierce beneath his calm face. And though she instantly dismissed it, the image stayed with her in a strange place of her memory, humming quietly like a string plucked too lightly to be noticed by anyone else. His name was Jacob Rylan, and he had arrived with the Terran delegation to rotations prior, a lone young representative of a species still considered primitive by most of the Concord. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, still muscle and bone and reckless hope, their bodies fragile by cosmic standards, their worlds tiny and loud, their spirits somehow both naive and defiant. The council viewed them as curiosities, amusing and occasionally impressive, but rarely important, rarely dangerous, rarely worthy of the deeper respect reserved for species that bent time or rewrote the rules of reality with their minds. And so Jacob Rylan was assigned the same status as many humans before him, harmless, ordinary, inconsequential. But the truth was that Jacob had not come to be an observer. He had come because humanity was on the edge of being dismissed, pushed aside by ancient empires who believed his species had nothing to offer, and Earth had sent him not as a soldier, not as a diplomat, but as something far stranger, a test, a signal to any who doubted the human will, to prove that, even in a universe of impossible beings and unimaginable power, there remained one force underestimated by all, the human instinct to fight for survival, to endure where logic said they should fall, to stare into the infinite and say not in defiance, but in certainty, I will not break. Jacob did not know he would meet a princess. He did not know she would shape his fate. He only knew that something was wrong the moment he stepped into the council hall for the grand assembly, a tension in the air like invisible claws scraping against the shielding walls, an undercurrent he sensed, not with technology or training, but with something earthly, primal, a sixth sense bred from thousands of generations of predators and prey. He stood at the back, hands clasped, eyes sharp, and though no one noticed him, he noticed everything. The flicker of unease in alien eyes, the faint tremor underfoot, the silence that was too heavy to be ceremonial. Princess Aranel took her place on the elevated dais, radiant in the pale glow of the her voice rising with practiced authority as she welcomed the assembled envoys, yet mid-sentence she faltered, her eyes widening, because she too sensed it, a disturbance not outside the hall but within her own mind, a whisper of something older than the Concord, older than the empires, older than the light burning in the heart of the galaxy itself, a ripple of presence, monstrous and deliberate. And in that moment she knew something terrible was about to breach the chamber. It happened without warning, a tear in space opening above the delegates like a wound sliced through the air, leaking black smoke that moved with the intelligence of a living thing, coiling and twisting into a shape that was not a shape, a being whose name the council feared to speak. A void-spawned predator drifted into the hall, its limbs shimmering between solidity and shadow, its eyes like collapsing stars, its roar shaking minds rather than air, and chaos erupted instantly. Screams rippled across the chamber, shields flared, weapons were drawn, but the creature was too fast, too strong, too ancient, lashing through dignitaries with effortless force, turning stone and psionic barriers into dust. Aranel felt the psychic pressure of the beast slamming against her skull, trying to crush her mind into nothing. She staggered, her vision blurring, her heartbeat thundering, and her royal guard rushed to her side, but even their elite training faltered beneath the cosmic abomination. One guard was flung across the chamber, another dissolved into particles of light, and Aranel knew with cold clarity that she would be next, her body shaking, her ancestry of pride and power suddenly meaningless before the infinite hunger of the beast descending upon her. But then something happened that made even the monster hesitate. A sound rose behind her, a single human voice, loud and sharp and furious, cutting through the terror like a blade, and Jacob Rylan stepped forward from the scattering crowd, his jaw clenched, his eyes blazing, and with no armor, no weapon, no augmentation, nothing but his bare hands and the fierce determination the council had laughed at for generations. He sprinted toward the cosmic beast as if he had been born for this single moment, as if he had been waiting his whole life to strike at something impossible. The princess stared in disbelief, unable to fathom what she was witnessing. Humans were fragile, their bones too soft, their muscles too limited, their minds too grounded in material physics to comprehend beings like this one. Yet Jacob did not stop. He leaped with the force of someone who refused to die quietly, slamming into the beast's side with a roar of his own, grabbing onto its shifting flesh or shadow or whatever substance it possessed, holding on even as its energy burned his skin, even as its claws raked across his arms, tearing blood from him in streams. Yet he gripped tighter, his fingers sinking deeper, his teeth bare, his entire body shaking with raw, unfiltered willpower. The creature shrieked, a sound that cracked the air itself, trying to dislodge him, whipping its form violently, slamming him against pillars, dragging him through fracturing stone. But Jacob remained attached like a living anchor, and with every brutal movement he struck back, punching, tearing, ripping at whatever part of the monster seemed most vulnerable, fighting with a fury that no alien could understand, a fury born not from hatred but from the simple, brutal truth that humans refused to surrender, refused to submit, refused to allow extinction to claim them without a fight. Aranel watched, breathless, as the human wrestled the cosmic beast, his body breaking but never buckling, his voice growling through shattered ribs, his eyes bright with something almost terrifying. And she felt something shift inside her, something she had not felt in cycles. Awe, pure and staggering awe, because this creature, this human, this supposedly primitive being, was doing what the most powerful species of the Concord had failed to do. He was holding the beast at bay with nothing but himself, nothing but his mortal strength and impossible resolve. The beast writhed, weakening under Jacob's relentless assault, and with one final roar he drove it backward, dragging it toward the still open rift above the hall, pushing it inch by inch, despite the way its energy seared his flesh, despite the blood soaking his clothes, despite the pain that would have killed any other being long before. And at last, with a final heave, fueled by everything left inside him, he forced the creature into the rift, shoving it back into the void it had crawled from, and the tear in space snapped shut with a thunderous crack, leaving only silence, devastation, and the trembling breath of a human who remained upright only because he refused to fall. The hall stared at him in shock, even the surviving psionic elites whispering in disbelief, their minds shattered by the impossibility of what they had witnessed. And Jacob turned slowly, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his fingertips, his clothes torn, his body bruised and burned. And when his eyes met Princess Aranel, something passed between them, something deep and wordless, something that neither the Council nor the galaxy had prepared her for, the realization that humanity was not what the universe believed, and that this human in particular was something far greater than anyone had dared imagine. Then Jacob collapsed, and darkness took him. But the memory of what he had done burned inside every witness, like a star that refused to die. And inside Princess Aranel, it ignited something far more dangerous, a belief she had never once considered, the belief that the human was not ordinary at all. When Jacob reopened his eyes, the world returned in fragments, colors first, then shapes, then pain, a deep and rhythmic throb that pulsed through every limb, as if his bones themselves were angry at him. He found himself lying on a soft platform woven from luminescent vines, strange symbols hovering above him like drifting fireflies, scanning his body, knitting torn tissue back together. The air smelled faintly of crystal dust and healing resin, and distant voices murmured just beyond the shimmering privacy curtain of the medical chamber. But the voice he focused on was closer, steadier, and somehow familiar. "You should not be awake yet," it said, and Jacob turned his head, wincing at the sharp spike of pain across his ribs, seeing Princess Aranel standing beside him, her silver robes dimmed in respect, her expression unreadable yet softened by something he could not name. He tried to sit up, regretted it instantly, and she pressed a gentle hand to his shoulder, guiding him back down. "You nearly died," she murmured, her voice a mixture of reprimand and awe. "No one has ever confronted a void spawn with bare hands. You should be vaporized, crushed, or broken in ways no healer could mend. And yet here you are, breathing." Jacob swallowed, tasting the bitterness of dried blood on his breath. "Council needed time," he muttered, his words slurred but determined. "Someone had to keep that thing busy." Aranel stared at him, her violet eyes narrowing with an emotion he could not decipher, something between disbelief and admiration. "You call that keeping it busy?" she whispered. "You wrestled it into the rift with nothing but your own flesh." He shrugged weakly. "Didn't have much else on me." For the first time, Aranel laughed, a soft, melodic sound like starlight brushing glass. But beneath it lay a tremble, as though she still replayed the memory of how close she had come to death. Jacob noticed the tension in her shoulders, the faint exhaustion behind her eyes, and he wondered what the attack had truly meant, why the Voidspawn had targeted the council, and what greater force lay behind it. But before he could ask, the privacy curtain flickered away, and a group of high-ranking officials entered the chamber, their faces solemn, their eyes darting between the princess and the recovering human. "Princess Aranel," one of the elder envoys said, bowing slightly. "We must discuss the implications of the attack." Then the elder's gaze shifted to Jacob, and the implications of what he is. Jacob nearly rolled his eyes, weary of being treated like a curiosity, but Aranel stepped forward, placing herself subtly between him and the envoys, her posture regal and firm. "He saved every life in that chamber," she said, her voice sharp. "He deserves recognition, not suspicion." The envoys exchanged uneasy glances. "No human should possess such physical capacity," another official murmured. "It defies biology, it defies physics, it defies our understanding of your species." Jacob exhaled slowly. "I'm not special," he said, though he was not entirely certain it was true. "Humans just do what we have to. Doesn't matter if we're outmatched." The elder envoy's expression tightened, as though the phrase unsettled him more than the attack itself, and Aranel noticed, her gaze sharpening as she studied them. "You fear him," she realized. "You fear what he represents." But the envoy only bowed again. "We fear the unknown, Princess, and the unknown has a way of remaking the universe." After they departed, Jacob let out a low groan, frustration mingling with pain. "Great," he muttered. "I punch a monster and now the galaxy thinks I'm a threat." Aranel stepped closer, her expression softer now. "They do not understand humans," she said. "They never have." She hesitated, then added, "I never did. Until now." Jacob opened his mouth to respond, but she raised a hand gently. "Rest for now," she whispered. "Your body is mending, and your strength is needed more than you know." Hours passed, or perhaps days. Time blurred in the cool luminescence of the healing chamber. Jacob drifted in and out of uneasy sleep, haunted by fragments of the battle, the roar of the beast, the weight of its shifting mass under his hands, the burn of its energy tearing into him. But another feeling lingered beneath it, a strange certainty that the attack had not been random, that the Voidspawn had come for someone or something specific, and the whispering darkness behind the rift still brushed the edges of his mind like a memory he couldn't shake. When he awoke again, Aranel was gone, replaced by a young healer who informed him curtly that he was discharged, his wounds mostly repaired, though the scars both physical and otherwise might never fully fade. Jacob stretched, wincing but functional, pulling on the fresh clothes laid out for him. Simple dark garments woven with energy thread, surprisingly comfortable, and stepped out into the corridor, unsure where to go, unsure what awaited him beyond the crystalline walls. He did not wander long before voices reached him, echoing down from the council chamber above, raised, urgent, fearful, and Jacob followed them instinctively, his pace quickening as he sensed tension thickening the air again. He reached the entrance just as the doors slid open, revealing Princess Aranel, exiting with swift, determined steps, her expression troubled. She nearly collided with him, stopping inches away, her breath catching in surprise. "Jacob," she whispered, "I was on my way to find you." "What's happened now?" he asked, though he already sensed the answer would not be pleasant. Aranel glanced around, ensuring they were alone, then spoke in a low, urgent voice. "The attack was not isolated," she said, "for other worlds have reported similar breaches. Voidspawn emerging from anomalous rifts, targeting political centers, targeting key figures." Jacob's mind sharpened instantly. "Coordinated," he muttered. "Someone's directing them." Aranel nodded grimly. "That is our fear, and the council believes that whoever commands these creatures seeks to destabilize the Concord." Jacob frowned. "Why me then?" Aranel hesitated. "Because you pushed one back," she said quietly. "You did what no elite warrior or psionic champion has managed in centuries." The moment the creature returned to the void, the rift collapsed unnaturally, as if something on the other side recoiled. Jacob blinked. "Surprised? Recoil?" he echoed. From me, Aranel looked him dead in the eyes. Yes, from you. Before Jacob could respond, alarms blared throughout the chamber, red light flooding the hallways, the floor trembling beneath their feet. A voice thundered over the intercom. Breach detected in Sector 9. Void energy levels rising. Jacob felt his body react before his mind fully processed the words. Muscles tightening, heartbeat quickening. Aranel reached for his arm. "Wait," she said. "You are not healed." He cannot, but Jacob had already moved, sprinting down the corridor toward Sector 9, the princess cursing softly before racing after him. They reached the observation platform overlooking the training grounds, just as space tore open once more, a rift forming in mid-air like a wound ripping through reality, tendrils of black mist pouring forth, swirling into another void smaller than the first, but just as vicious. Soldiers rushed forward, shields igniting, weapons firing beams of condensed energy, but the creature carved through them with terrifying ease, moving like liquid shadow, its shrieks piercing the air. Jacob's pulse hammered in his ears, a surge of something ancient rising in his chest. He leaped from the platform, landing hard on the ground, his legs trembling but holding, and charged toward the monster before anyone could stop him. Aranel shouted after him, but her voice was drowned out by the roar of the beast. Jacob closed the distance with reckless speed, dodging a swipe of its tendrils. Grabbing onto one and yanking it downward with all his strength, the creature crashed into the ground, writhing, its form flickering violently. Soldiers stared in shock as Jacob pulled the beast closer, grappling it, slamming his knee into its shifting mass. Every strike driven by instinct and fury, the creature retaliated, lashing out with searing energy, burning across Jacob's shoulder, but he tightened his grip, teeth clenched, refusing to let go. Once more the battle raged, but this time Jacob was not alone. Aranel sprinted forward, summoning a blade of pure psionic light, her eyes burning with royal power, and she sliced into the void spawn with a cry of defiance. The soldiers regrouped, firing in unison, driving the creature back, weakening it under the combined assault. Jacob seized the moment, pulling it to the ground and pinning it with brutal strength, shouting over the chaos, "Push it toward the rift." The others obeyed, blasts of energy forcing the monstrous mass toward the still open tier, its form shrieking, distorting, struggling. Aranel met Jacob's eyes, and for a brief second an understanding passed between them, the same unspoken vow they had both felt in the council hall. She nodded, and together they heaved the creature backward, Jacob's roar blending with the beast's as they forced it over the edge, shoving it back into the darkness. The rift rippling violently before collapsing with a crackling implosion, leaving silence and trembling air behind. Jacob fell to one knee, exhaustion overtaking him. Aranel rushed to his side, gripping his arms. "You cannot keep doing this," she whispered fiercely. "You will tear yourself apart." Jacob looked up at her, breathing hard. "Then tell me what's happening," he said. "Tell me why they keep coming." Aranel hesitated, her expression darkening, fear flickering in her eyes for the first time since he'd met her. "Because someone in the void," she said softly, "is looking for you." Jacob froze, his breath catching. "Me," he echoed. "Why?" Aranel swallowed, her voice trembling. "Because they are afraid," she whispered, "and whatever you are, whatever you did in the council hall, it woke something ancient." The training grounds remained silent around them, soldiers staring at the human and the princess kneeling together, both shaken, both breathing hard, both realizing the truth at the same moment. The war had not begun with the Voidspawn attack. It had begun with Jacob Rylan's defiance, and something in the darkness wanted to end him before he learned why he mattered. The hours after the second breach passed in a blur of alarms, emergency councils, and frantic reports from distant systems, but Jacob barely registered any of it, because every time he blinked he saw the void, its swirling darkness, its shifting hunger. The way the rift itself had seemed to recoil from him, as though something inside it recognized him, feared him, or perhaps wanted him. The thought gnawed at him like an animal clawing inside his chest, and he followed Princess Aranel through the corridors of the palace with heavy steps, feeling the weight of a truth that he sensed was close but still hidden behind a veil of unspoken dread. Aranel said nothing at first, her expression focused, her posture tense. She moved with the silent urgency of someone racing against time, and Jacob could see it in the angle of her jaw, the flare of her eyes. She was afraid, not just of the Voidspawn or the attacks, but of the answer she was about to give him. They descended deeper into the structure, past rooms of glowing archives and whispering psionic currents, past shimmering crystal barriers that parted for Aranel alone, entering parts of the palace Jacob suspected no human had ever seen. Finally they reached a sealed chamber, the doors engraved with spiraling sigils that pulsed faintly like breathing embers. Aranel placed her hand on the center glyph, energy rippling from her palm, the door shifting open with a low hum. Inside was darkness lit only by a single hovering sphere of slow-turning starlight, illuminating shelves of ancient tablets and records that looked older than empires. Jacob felt a chill slide down his spine. "What is this place?" he asked quietly. Aranel stepped forward, her voice hushed. "The archive of forbidden echoes," she said, "recorded memories of events too dangerous to be known freely, truths kept hidden to protect the Concord, or to protect the universe from itself." Jacob swallowed, uncertain where he fit into that grim equation. Aranel moved to a pedestal, where a crystalline slate rested beneath layers of dust. She brushed her hand across it, awakening it, glyphs and images rising into the air in swirling patterns, fragments of battles, rifts, and monstrous shapes materializing like ghosts. Jacob stepped closer, brow furrowing. "These are void spawn," he said. Recognizing the twisted silhouettes, Aranel nodded. "Yes, but these are from the first War of Shadows, hundreds of cycles before humans took their first steps into space." Jacob frowned. "So why are you showing me this?" Aranel hesitated, then spoke the words he least expected. "Because humans fought in that war." Jacob stared at her, the words too strange to process. "That's not possible," he said, shaking his head. "Humans weren't anywhere near the stars back then. Our species was barely forming civilizations." Aranel met his gaze with a painful seriousness. "That is what the Concord believed for ages," she said. "But the archive recorded something different, something buried because no one wished to believe it. Humans were present at the final breach of the First War, not as an empire, not as a species, but as one man." Jacob felt the world tilt, a hollow ringing filling his ears. "One," he whispered. "Just one." Aranel nodded slowly. "A warrior, unnamed in most accounts, peering through a collapsed rift with no explanation, no technology, nothing but his own body. He sealed the breach by fighting the void entity trying to enter our universe. He forced it back, sacrificing himself, and the rift collapsed around him." Jacob stepped back, shaking his head in disbelief. "You think that's connected to me?" Aranel exhaled, the breath trembling slightly. "The descriptions match an impossible pattern. Impossible until today. The way he fought, the way he survived long enough to force the entity into retreat. It was the same as you." Jacob's stomach twisted, something in him resisting the idea, something in him also recognizing it, a strange familiarity, a whispering in his blood that made his heart pound. "But that doesn't make sense," he said, voice hoarse. "Humans aren't supposed to survive void energy. We don't have psionics. We don't warp space. We don't manipulate the cosmic field." Aranel stepped closer, her voice lowering. "Exactly. And yet you did, which means everything we believed about your species may be wrong." Before Jacob could reply, the chamber trembled, the starlight sphere flickering violently. Aranel spun around, eyes sharp. "The rifts," she whispered. "Another one is forming." Jacob didn't wait for details. He raced out of the chamber, Aranel following close behind, the corridors rumbling as alarms began to scream through the palace. Sector 3, the intercom roared. Elite guards fall back, entity emerging. Containment failing. Jacob's pulse surged. He felt a strange heat rising from within him, like fire pressing beneath his skin, as though some ancient instinct was waking inside him, guiding his steps, empowering his muscles, sharpening his focus until the air itself seemed to slow around him. They reached the plaza just as the rift opened, towering above the crystalline towers like a wound, spilling darkness, energy crackling outward in violent spirals. This void spawn was larger than the previous ones, closer in size to the beast Jacob had fought in the council hall, its body unraveling and reforming like liquid shadow, its roar silent yet deafening in the mind. Elite guards formed a perimeter, their weapons blazing, their shields flaring, but the creature smashed through them effortlessly, warping space with every movement. Jacob felt Aranel tense beside him. "This is no ordinary void spawn," she said. "This one is hunting." Jacob stepped forward, his fists clenching. "Hunting what?" he asked. Though he already feared the answer, Aranel didn't look at him. She stared at the creature with widening eyes. "Not what?" she whispered. "Who?" The void spawn turned toward Jacob, its shifting face forming a shape that seemed almost like recognition, the rift behind it pulsing as if something beyond the veil were leaning closer, listening, waiting. Jacob felt the heat in his blood surge, rising in waves, and before Aranel could stop him, he sprinted straight toward the monster, the ground cracking under his feet with every step. The creature lashed out with a limb of crackling shadow, but Jacob dodged, moving faster than he thought possible, grabbing the limb with both hands and pulling, the force ripping a shockwave through the air. The void spawn shrieked, its form distorting violently. Jacob lunged upward, slamming into its torso, driving his shoulder through its shifting mass. The energy burned him instantly, pain ripping up his side, but he refused to let go, refused to yield, refused to die. The creature thrashed, dragging him upward into the air, slamming him against a spire, but Jacob twisted and drove his elbow into its structure, ripping a chunk of its shadow flesh free, light bursting from the wound like bleeding stars. Aranel raised her hands, summoning a torrent of psionic energy. Her eyes blazing with royal power, she hurled the force into the beast, striking it with a thunderous pulse that sent it crashing to the ground. Jacob fell with it, landing in a roll that sent agony up his spine. But he rose, staggering, refusing to stop fighting. The void spawn shifted, reaching toward him again, its voice whispering inside his head. No words, just hunger and recognition, as though it were calling him something ancient, something lost. Then the rift behind the creature expanded, widening like a mouth, and Jacob felt it in his bones, an overwhelming force reaching through the breach. Not the creature, not the void spawn, but something far more powerful. A presence so vast and cold, it made his entire body tremble. Aranel gasped, clutching her temples. "Something is coming through," she cried, but Jacob felt it more deeply than she could. The voice rising from the rift, a vibration inside his bloodline, inside his memory, inside the very core of his being. It spoke without words, yet its message burned into him like a brand. "Found you," Jacob staggered, sweat pouring from his skin, his vision pulsing, the world dissolving into flashes of ancient images. A battlefield of darkness, a lone human standing before a colossal beast, a hand reaching, a sacrifice made, something ripped from him, buried, forgotten. Jacob fell to one knee, clutching his skull as the memories flooded him. Fragmented, broken, incomplete. Aranel ran to him, grabbing his shoulders, shouting his name, but the voice in the rift drowned everything out. Returned at last. The void spawn lunged, but Jacob rose with a roar that split the air, not entirely his voice. A second echo behind it, ancient and terrible. He seized the creature by its upper limbs and twisted with impossible strength, ripping its form apart in a burst of void energy, the shockwave blasting outward, shattering nearby structures. The rift convulsed violently, the presence retreating like a tide pulled back by a hidden force, and with one final, thunderous crack, it collapsed, leaving silence and devastation behind. Jacob collapsed again, breathing hard, his vision fading. Aranel knelt beside him, her voice shaking. "Jacob," she whispered, "what happened? What did you hear?" Jacob looked up at her with haunted eyes, his voice barely a whisper. "It found me," he said, "something from the void, something older than the beasts, something that knew me before I was born." Aranel's face paled, her hands trembling as she held him upright. "Jacob," she breathed, "what are you?" Jacob didn't answer, because he didn't know, but as he stared at the broken plaza, the fading sparks of void energy drifting like dying embers, he realized something terrifying. Whatever the void wanted, whatever ancient force had reached for him, it had not finished, and the next time the rift opened, it wouldn't send a beast, it would come for him itself. The palace lay in ruins, smoke rising from shattered spires, the crystalline walkways fractured from the shockwaves that had rippled through the city when Jacob tore the void spawn apart. Medics rushed between survivors, healers channeled shimmering waves of psionic light into the wounded. Soldiers stood in trembling silence, staring at the place where Jacob had unleashed a strength no human should possess. And Jacob himself sat on the broken edge of a collapsed balcony, the air cold against his sweat-soaked skin, his thoughts churning like a storm he couldn't escape. Aranel approached him slowly, her footsteps soft on the cracked surface. She had changed into ceremonial armor, silver and violet plates glowing faintly with internal light. Though her expression was far from regal, her eyes were shadowed, her posture weary. She lowered herself beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "The council is in turmoil," she murmured, They fear the void, but they fear you more. Jacob winced, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, notice that, Aranel exhaled, shaking her head. They do not understand what happened, Jacob, truthfully. Neither do I. Jacob stared at his hands, flexing his fingers, remembering the way the Voidspawn's body had torn apart in his grip, remembering the voice that had whispered into his very marrow. It recognized me, he said quietly. Whatever was in that rift, it knew me, Aranel. Before I was born, before my species even crawled into the stars. Aranel shivered, the memory troubling her as well. The archive suggested a connection. She said, but if that being truly remembers you, then the universe is far older and far stranger than even our histories say. Jacob looked at her, fear and determination warring in his eyes. It's coming, he said. You felt it too, didn't you? Aranel nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes. Before either could say more, the air vibrated with a low, thunderous hum. The ground trembled, and a holographic projection burst to life above the plaza, flickering with urgency. An envoy's voice boomed through the city. Emergency decree. Rift signatures blooming across every major system. Void activity escalating beyond predicted thresholds. Evacuation protocols preparing. But then the envoy's voice stuttered, the hologram glitching violently. The sky above them darkened as space itself began to ripple. Aranel shot to her feet, face pale. No, not here, not again. Jacob rose beside her, feeling that same heat ignite in his blood. Stronger this time, almost alive. Space tore open above the capital. But this rift was unlike the others. Larger, wider, pulsing with deep purple and black currents, expanding with terrifying speed. Soldiers shouted orders, shields activated, energy cannons aligned, but Jacob barely heard them. Because the moment the rift fully opened, the world fell silent. A presence stepped through, tall, impossibly tall, a silhouette of shifting energy, shaped like a humanoid, but composed of swirling starlight and shadow. Its face blank and featureless except for two burning points of light where eyes should be. The air around it warped, crackling with cosmic pressure. Even the Voidspawn paled in comparison. Soldiers dropped to their knees, some clutching their heads, overwhelmed by the psychic force radiating from the being. Aranel staggered, gritting her teeth, and Jacob felt as though a mountain had dropped onto his chest. The being turned its head toward him. Its voice thundered through every mind in the city, not spoken but felt, resonating in the bones, in the blood, in the soul. Returned at last. Fragment of the first. Jacob froze, his heart slamming against his ribs. What does that mean? Aranel whispered, though Jacob couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. The being descended slowly, its feet not touching the ground, the plaza cracking under the pressure of its presence. Soldiers raised their weapons in trembling hands, but Aranel lifted an arm, shouting, "Stand down. Your weapons will do nothing against this." The cosmic figure stopped before Jacob, towering like a living constellation, its glowing eyes fixed on him. Jacob forced himself to stand tall, though every instinct screamed to run. "What do you want from me?" he demanded, his voice strained. The being's reply came like a tidal wave of memory, emotion, and ancient power. "You were one of us, once, a shard of the eternal breaking, born of defiance, crafted to fight the darkness when the universe was young. You faced the first beast in the Rift Wars. You sealed the breach with your own existence. But the cost was the shattering of your essence, fractured into pieces lost across time and creation. One fragment became human." Jacob felt the words strike him, images flooding his mind, visions of ancient war, of colossal beings clashing in the void, of a figure like him, exactly him standing alone before an endless storm of darkness, sacrificing himself to save a universe that barely existed yet. He staggered, gripping his skull, memories not his own tearing through him like knives. Aranel grabbed his shoulder, steadying him, eyes wide with horror. "Jacob," she breathed, "you're a reincarnated piece of a cosmic entity." The being nodded, its form pulsing like a star about to collapse. "And now, fragment reborn, you must return. The void rises once more. Our kind faded, scattered, broken, but you remain, the last spark, the one who can end the cycle. Rejoin us, reclaim your true self, ascend." Jacob's breath hitched, the ground swaying beneath him. "You want to take me," he said, the words barely audible. The being extended a hand of shimmering starlight. "You were never meant to be mortal. Join us, and save creation." Aranel stepped between them without hesitation, her eyes blazing with defiance. "He is not yours to claim," she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "He is Jacob. He is human. He belongs to his own life." The cosmic being tilted its head, regarding her as though she were a flicker of dust in a supernova. "You are insignificant, little sovereign. This fragment's destiny lies beyond the mortal frame you cherish." Aranel didn't flinch. She raised her chin. "If he was truly once like you, then he deserves a choice." Jacob trembled, not from fear of the cosmic being, but from the weight of its offer, a truth burning inside him, a call that resonated in every cell, memories urging him to join to reclaim a power older than galaxies, to save the universe from the rising void. But another truth rose in him too, softer but stronger, forged in flesh and blood, in choices and wounds and stubborn humanity. He looked at Aranel, at the people fighting around them, at the worlds he'd sworn to protect, not through cosmic destiny, but through will, and he knew the truth. He was not the first fragment, he was Jacob Rylan, and humans did not bow to destiny. Jacob stepped forward, Aranel holding her breath, the cosmic being towering over him. "I remember enough to know what you are," he said, voice steady now. "I remember the war, the sacrifice, the reason we fought." The being leaned closer, its voice rumbling like collapsing stars. "Then you know why you must return." Jacob shook his head. "No," he said, "I know why I must stay." For the first time, the cosmic being faltered, its glow flickering. "You refuse ascension. You refuse your nature." Jacob clenched his fists, the heat inside him flaring so intensely that cracks of light began running across his skin like molten veins. "Humans aren't defined by where we came from," he said. "We're defined by what we choose." Aranel's breath caught, her eyes shining, and Jacob raised his voice, shouting so the entire city could hear, "And I choose to fight as a human." The cosmic being recoiled, its form rippling with shock. "No mortal can contain the first's power. Your body will break." Jacob set his jaw. "Then let it break," he growled. "I'll heal. I'll stand up again." "That's what we do," the being roared, a sound like a collapsing galaxy, and Jacob's body erupted in blinding light, energy tearing from him in waves. The ground split open, the air ignited, the sky burned in spirals of brilliance. The cosmic being reached out, trying to force his ascension, but Jacob pushed back with a roar that shattered the palace walls. "I am human," he bellowed, "and humans don't surrender." The cosmic being's form trembled, unable to withstand the force of Jacob's defiance. The light from Jacob's body grew so bright that even Aranel had to shield her eyes, energy blasting upward like a supernova contained in flesh, and with a final, thunderous cry, Jacob unleashed the full might of the fragment within him, not to join the cosmic being, but to annihilate it. The blast consumed the creature in a storm of light and void-rending force, the rift shrieking as it collapsed in on itself, pulled into nothingness, leaving a sky of trembling stars behind. When the light faded, the plaza was silent. Jacob lay collapsed on the ground, smoke drifting from his skin, his breath weak but steady. Aranel fell to her knees beside him, cradling his head, tears falling onto his burned shoulders. "Jacob," she whispered, voice breaking, "please stay, please stay." His eyes fluttered open, exhausted but alive, and he managed a faint smile as he whispered, "Told you, humans get back up." And across the city, across the Concord, across every world that had witnessed the cosmic battle, through trembling skies, a new truth spread like dawn. Not even the stars could command a human's fate, for once again, humanity had made the universe blink first.